Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Coming to you on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And what an honor it is to bring in a cat who has been expanding the sonic nature of music for the last, my gosh, probably half century, doing it in different acoustic and electric forms, what we would call music concrete. And this is like kind of music that I really loved for quite some time, and it's sort of become a lost art form to a degree, just because in reality, technology and the inanimacy of music has sort of taken over in full reign. But my guest is somebody who came up at a time when, learning was done on the bandstand within smaller ensembles. There was places to play live, and ultimately he was able to build a career doing jingles and commercials and music for planetariums. One of the hippest cats around, Jack Tamul. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Oh, thank you very much. You know, I'm laughing because I recently just had to go to the doctor for a checkup, and the medical tech says date of birth. You know, they always ask you when I went. Yeah. So I told them my date of birth, and the girl goes, "Wow."
Yeah, man. I mean, you know that you're getting dated a little bit, but it's fine. I mean, you would say, I mean, is it fair to say that you are still composing today?
Oh, I'm in the studio as we speak. Wow. Yes, every day.
I was hoping you could talk to the audience a little bit about, how you've always viewed music, and not that maybe that you had expectations, but like the idea that if your intentions were always to expand the sonic nature of whatever you were hearing.
Well, I kind of went from it from kind of an internal way. I think so often when you're learning music or learning any craft, you kind of come from the outside, and it's like you are expected to learn it and then to do it.
Totally.
And the real guys that really get it don't do it; they become it.
That's right, man. So let's just talk. I mean,
right? You got to be in the groove. They call. You hear musicians say that all the time. Okay, now we're in the groove. They at that point mean they have become it, and they're all on the same wavelength, on the same mission, going the same way together. The hardest thing to do is to get out of your way. And it's not so much a journey that this is what I want to do or expand upon something. It's mostly discovering things along the way that you had no idea that were ever there. And just following that path, it seems to be opening up to you.
Can you talk about an example early in your life when that went down? I mean, in some cases, when you became, I don't know if you were, for some reason I have this idea that you were a lot of times, especially when your professional career started, you were working kind of in a solo operation. But I do know that like cats like Luciano Barrio, he used to take small ensembles on the road. I mean, did you have an opportunity to become one with your bandmates that you can talk about?
Well, my bandmates were more like orchestra members, doing pieces with orchestra, etc. But early on, I just really started really focusing in on studio production. You were talking about music concrete, so there's like Pierre Schaeffer, was one guy that I really followed. He's the early French guys of doing music concrete.
Wow. What years was he doing that?
Oh, in the 40s.
Wow.
Yeah, there was Schaefer and, I'm trying to think of the other guy's name that was famous in the studio with him. Sorry, I slipped. But yeah, basically they were the ones doing music concrete, tunes like Dipsody, where they would just, mic a drop of water coming down and you followed that, and then they would do variations on that, and just taking natural elements and then really exploring the inner beings of that element, just like a microscope, going inward, following, and manipulating sounds that way, coming up with new sounds, using a lot of early studio techniques, things, simple things like reverse and slowing down and, tape manipulation.
I love this, dude. Yeah, it's that's great.
Things that you can't do. I mean, you can simulate some of the things in modern technology, but, each medium has its own peculiarities that, you learn to do them. Studio engineers just, learn techniques. They know how to produce on the boards. They know, what they can get out of their gear. And so that's it too. If you can't, so tape, I come from the days where, 2 tracks, 4 tracks, 8 tracks, 16 tracks, 24 tracks,
Absolutely. Oh, God.
2-inch tape.
This is greatest in the world. I mean, that's, yeah. Go ahead.
Right, when the guys show up delivering your, a hard drive, I mean, my God, when the guys way back in the days had to bring the tape in on a forklift.
No, because, I wanted that. That's such a good question because were you hip to what was going on in other parts of the country? I mean, there was like the electronic tape center in San Francisco and with Ramon Sender and those cats. I mean,
yeah, right, for sure.
Did
friends of mine, a lot of them.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. So I mean, like, did those cats in the 40s though? I want to be clear. Like Schaefer, was it basically natural sounds? Was there any form to the music itself? It wasn't like out of the American Songbook and he was running water dripping next to it or something.
Well, that's a point form. Well, if you take a drop of water, it has form.
Yeah, that's true.
If you break it apart, kind of stretch it out, it still has the form. If you took a Beethoven symphony and shrunk it down into 5 seconds, it's still the Beethoven symphony. But it's a completely different thing now.
So, I mean, Jack, we're already having a ball with Jack Tamul. Listen, we have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I don't necessarily expect you to know who this is, but pay attention to the content because I really want to come back and pick your brain on this, all right?
Okay.
I only did it one time live.
Can you talk about that experience?
At the Donnell Library in New York, which actually an old friend who was the first guy to ever record me called George Claben, he actually recorded that concert. And that concert was with Mel Lewis, and it was going to be Richard Davis. I believe it was Eddie Gomez. And there was one musique concrète piece that they had to listen to with earphones, and they had never played it before, and the whole idea was to suddenly spontaneously improvise with the tape. But these kinds of things were going on in my life in the early 60s in New York. I was experimenting with old, in fact, I still have the oldest tape recorder I ever had. I still have.
I love it. This is important. Keep going.
And it's a tape recorder where you can change the speed while the tape is running, and you can't find that technology anymore because somebody changed it. I also used to have an old Ewer, which took 5-inch reels, and you could also change those speeds while the tape was running. So you could do many interesting different effects.
Jack, that was my first interview with a dear friend, Roger Kellaway. Are you hip to that cat?
No, I'm not, but I sure do understand everything he's talking about.
Well, that's what I wanted to say. Early 60s, Jack Tamul, clearly experimenting. The floor is yours. I mean, what were you... See, what Roger did at Donnell Library was that he basically, coming out of the jazz school or the jazz, idiom, he had the drummer and bass player put on headphones and listen to a musique concrète piece and then basically play off of that and react to that. But I really want you to talk about when you first started to get in the quote unquote laboratory, what you were doing with tape early on, and I mean, and talk about if there are any recordings around.
Yeah, I first got involved in it, believe it or not, in a small town, Jacksonville, Florida. There was a Bob Moog went down to Jacksonville and put in an electronic music studio. At that time, it was the largest electronic music studio in the Southeast.
Oh my God! Moog went there. Moog went to Jacksonville and put it. I can't believe that.
Oh yeah, actually, they became very, very good friends with the guy that was a professor there, a guy named Bill Hoskins, who was way beyond his time.
Whoa! And dude. Wait! He was your elder?
So
yeah, go ahead.
Moog was, wow. Put in a big synthesizer unit there in a tape studio, and I went down there. I was going to Berkeley. I left Berkeley and I went down there with the thoughts of just staying there for a semester or two and, utilizing all this gear, because at that time there was none of that. Can you believe that? None of that at Berkeley, which is predominantly that now.
Incredible.
Incredible. Yeah, right. Yeah. And so there was really none of it anywhere. It was just really a new thing. You said synthesizer to somebody, and I had no earthly idea what you were talking about. None whatsoever. Now it's, I'd say anything. It's the biggest selling instruments there are. So anyway, I went down there, and this guy said, listen, here's the studio. Let's learn everything together. I know more than you, but and then Bob Moog was one of the guys there too most of the time. And then another good friend of mine, Howard Moscovich, who was out on the West Coast, but he was also at the studio at the same time as I was. And we were pretty much the only two guys utilizing this whole studio. I thought this was fantastic.
Oh, my God, this is insane, dude.
How long is this going to go on? And, nobody else really got interested in it at all because, again, it was so new. People just looked at it as a real oddity, kind of like a one-time thing. Will it last? And it actually wasn't until, till Carlos did switched on Bach, but a lot of the people who were into classic music at the time, got kind of turned on to it. That was kind of an eye-opener. Wow, you can do things like this with a synthesizer?
That is so that was, 68? When did he do that?
I can't give you the exact date, but it was certainly right at that point in time.
It was like late 60s. I know that
68, yeah. 69, 70. It was like the biggest classical selling album of the time. At that time, over 1 million copies of it sold. And so that kind of turned the tides. And all of a sudden, other people was, I'm kind of interested in this, and started getting more involved. But anyway, long story short, it was a tape studio, had unlimited access, great professor, another guy working with me, Howard, and we just went to town.
Can you talk about some of the sort of experiment? I mean, because you were like kids in a candy store.
Oh yeah, we would do all the old studio techniques. We just studied them. Things like tape loop machines.
Sure.
We had these tape loops. They were running, literally 150 feet long, and we'd have
yeah.
multiple tape loops, and we'd rig up all these pulley systems that would do tensions that you could tighten up the tape, etc., so it ran smooth. I used to do this thing with, I had, when 4-track recorders came out, a real big thing, 1/4-inch 4-tracks, TEAC made those things. And I would have 3, 4, 5 of them in a row lined up, and I would have on one side the supply reel, but I wouldn't do the take-up reel. I would pass the tape through all of the 4 or 5 recorders to the take-up reel on the last machine. And then I would I would turn it into this delay system where I would record on the first recorder, we'd get played back on the second one, third one, fourth one, and fifth one. And of course, the delay would be the amount of space I had between the machines. And also, I had the machines sliding on dollies, so I could continually change the level of the dimension.
Oh my, this is insane, dude. I
And then
cannot.
and then when it got down to the playback head on the fifth recorder, I'd send that signal back to the first recorder. So I've got this delay, and just ad infinitum, and these textures and sounds would just build up in this incredible thing, and I could of course control the volume level of each system that was coming out, out of each signal that was coming out of each machine. So signal from 2 could be a certain level. When it hit, it's machine 3, it could be a different level, et cetera, et cetera. So I could always be changing how the lines would contour. You could just create, these massive textures, and you could bring out textures, and stuff like that. You ain't going to do it on computers. It just won't happen. One program I had to do one time, it was a show. It was a planetarium show, but it was a show on time. And so when people were coming into the auditorium, there was a maitre d', a host there, a science teacher, and he would ask people what they thought of time, and they would say something, and then I would have this tape running again on this pulley system, probably 100 feet long. And then when it got to the other tape recorder, it was the same thing. It would bounce the signal at a lower level back to the first tape recorder, and over and over and over again. So when people filled the auditorium, the only thing that they heard while they were waiting for a show to begin was everybody in there's concept of time. It became like everybody was so silent because they were just listening to how we all felt about time. Things like that. Huh.
Going back to Berkeley, you were a classical major. Can you talk? Because as far as I know, everybody that I've interviewed from Berkeley was basically a jazzer. Did you?
Yeah, right.
Were
right.
you playing? Can you talk a little bit about? I know they
Sure.
didn't. They couldn't satiate your need for the synths, the Moog, those synthesizers. But I have to believe you were cooking the groove somewhere with the cats there.
Yeah. I went to Berkeley, and my instrument was piano. Right.
Right.
Yeah, and when I went to Berkeley was a 100% jazz school. Period. There wasn't anything else that they taught, which was great because, it was great to have a whole school in the same focus, It wasn't one of these, well, what's your major,
Totally, yeah. Straight ahead. Yeah.
My major's jazz. So, no, when I went to Berkeley, it was piano, and then I kind of got the hots for arranging and started studying arranging and stuff for 4/4 bands and small ensembles and things like that. And then it wasn't till because MIT, some friends of mine were at MIT, and there was some synthesizer research going on for corporations. Matter of fact, it was Guild Guitars who were trying to develop some synths back then, prototypes and things like that. And anyway, just hanging out with those guys and just, seeing what was going on in electronics and music. And then, always hip to these other guys that we were just talking about, Pierre Schaeffer and all those old French concrete schools. And I think, this is fascinating. And I just started gravitating towards it. And then when this Jacksonville thing happened, I said, oh, it was kind of meant to be. I got to go check it out.
You were not. It was a strictly jazz school. You didn't have to declare. Were you actually a jazz major there, or how did that work?
Yes, I was. Yeah, that's the only thing you could be, and focusing on different elements within that genre. Obviously your instruments, but, everybody had to take improvisational classes. Everybody had to take, all the standard arranging techniques, harmony theory, ear training, et cetera, just all the prep stuff to carry on as a musician, which was great because it was super focused.
Well, and I also think that, like, I mean, I got to be honest. I mean, the language, even though I wasn't even born, I mean, the language at that time of jazz, the language of jazz was not codified the way it is today. I mean, I don't think you could codify a street language, but can you? I just would love you to talk if you have any memories of the improv class and what kind of games they would play. Basically, I mean, I've just interviewed enough cats to know that. I mean, yeah, it was a focused jazz school,
Yeah,
but
sure.
there was a lot of people that were, I mean, that had opportunities to play on the bandstand a lot. I mean, they played live a lot, as opposed to today.
They played live a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
the ensemble rooms were going from like 9 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night, nonstop.
Wow.
And there were multiple rooms. This is the other thing that was great about it. If you wrote a chart, you know, if you wrote a chart, you could go down into the ensemble rooms and they would have bands there that were ready to go for the chart that you just wrote, you know, for the instrumentation that you had there, whether it was a trio, a quartet, a 4/4 band, a full orchestra, or what. Something was happening there, you know, and you may have had to wait a while to get it in there if they were really busy on somebody else's stuff, but you got your stuff in and they played it, and it was great. You know, it was really great. It was great. It was fabulous. And I highly recommend the school.
Were you kind of, would you say that you were a savant in some ways, or did you have anyone there that you, I mean, you're talking about composing like it's just, you know, something, you know, you can just, I mean, did it just come naturally to you?
Oh, no. It's, you know, everything has a craft that you have to learn, and then you just basically start specializing in craft. No, I mean, when I ended up getting a degree, it was in theory and composition. So, I mean, I really studied a lot of theory. When I left Florida, I went to Finland and worked at the at the Sibelius Academy for some grad work. And then I worked at the Finnish Radio Electronic Music Studios, and then, you know, came back this way and went on with other projects.
But, well, no, I mean, I really want you to, let's go deep in the weeds on this. I mean, how did the theory that you learned translate over into you? I guess to me in music, my definition of success in music is having a unique, singular sound, cutting above the morass of what everybody else is doing. I mean, is it, in music concrete, can you just talk about how you developed your own individual voice and what is your sort of individual sound and voice?
Yeah, and I can't say that everything I do is music concrete. I mean, I think if you go back to the real true definition of music concrete, it is really just taking environmental sounds, whatever they may be, and manipulating them and using them and turning them into, you know, music, or
Absolutely.
Turning them into a composition of some sort, more like a sculptor would do. So basically, yeah, I mean, I really started thinking of music more like a sculptor would. And because if you're in a studio, you know, you can bypass that middle guy. You don't have to run down to the ensemble room and see exactly what this sounds like. You know, you got all the gear right in front of you, and you can kind of manipulate the sound right then and there.
Wow.
And a lot of the theory that, you know, you learn in school is certainly applicable. You know, just doing standard techniques that any composer would do. You know, inverting things. You know, doing retrograde. You know, things. You know, transposing. All of those techniques work. It's just basically a different instrumentation. So, you know, I think the good electronic, concrete music, etc., you know, could be broken down and analyzed by anybody who had a theoretical background. You know, it's the same techniques, just a different instrument.
I need you to talk about whether it was at Jacksonville or the first time. Did you incorporate synthesizers and or music concrete in a live context when there was basically more opportunities for maybe you couldn't hear as well, or there was some kind of, just to me, like, the idea of you being a sculptor and having all the gear there in the studio, it's beautiful. You put together a perfect composition, but there's something about the live context. Did you ever play in a different idiom with and incorporate your? I know Callaway had Paul Beaver do some electronic tape music at a live jazz concert, and it didn't really actually work out so well. But the point is, can you talk about a seminal live performance for Jack Tamul?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. One time the state of Florida gave me this commission or grant to, my project was to find a poet in the Florida, which certainly there were many from, Key West and Tennessee Williams Foundation and all that.
Wow.
And then also a Florida singer. And then write a song cycle utilizing that poet and utilizing that singer. And so I took a poem by a guy named Richard Matthews, who teaches at the University of South Florida, called "The Referee Has Vanished." And
that came out in '82, though. That came out in '82, right?
Yeah, right.
Oh, I need a copy of that immediately.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
And then the tenor, a guy named William Brown, this really excellent black tenor that. As a good friend. And what I did was take, all the elements, or he would read through the poem, and we would just kind of find what is the emotional elements of this poem? What is the emotions that I want to bring out in all these phrases and words and things like this? And then what I would do is I would kind of tape him as an actor, like what, give me an emotional sound that would go with this phrase.
Oh, I dig.
And then we just colored, the entire poem in these sonic elements that were him. And then I worked all these things in, doing all the music concrete things that you're talking about. And that becomes, the background or the accompaniment for him doing a solo performance over it. And, and then a lot of it, of course, I could also do live, so again, at that element, we didn't have sampling machines and all that types of stuff that kids and everybody has today, so I did have, some elements of it that had to exist on tape. And then other elements of it, I would almost work the show like a DJ would do today.
Totally. I love the way you're articulating.
Yeah, we performed that all over the place. That was, But the majority of my stuff, one of the things, too, having to do this is a thing called make a living. And
Sing for your supper, they call it. Sing for your supper.
And, my habits also cost money,
Yep.
Buying
oh, my
gear
God,
and,
man. They're just huge. Well, the early Moogs, some of my friends have those early, guys like Jan Hammer and these other cats were using these, and so some of those are still around today, and and my friends use them in these cosmic settings, music rock kind of stretched out, and the sound on those early Moogs is unbelievable, man. It's unreal how beautiful it is.
Absolutely. And so I had all that kind of gear, and that kind of gear was at that time more expensive than way more expensive.
Well, so where would you even be able to get your hands on that stuff?
Well, a lot of it I was fortunate enough to buy. So, I just was doing gigs and making money and putting it into equipment and gear. I thought, well, might as well invest in what I do.
Totally. No, I'm going back to Jacksonville. Like you had that full laboratory to yourself. But if you went into an instrument store, it wasn't like did they have early Moog synthesizers in there?
Oh, no, no. I'd have to buy it, custom made or, everything. No, none of that stuff existed in any music store whatsoever.
So who was the cat? Who did you custom? Who was your builder?
Well, Moog. Moog had gear from Moog, right? Moog. And then Perlman came out with an Op 2600, which I thought was, this is fabulous. Had to get that.
Oh, the ARP synth. I need a picture of you from like '73, surrounded by all these synthesizers, dude. Like this. I was gonna say, what about Don Buchla? Does that name ring a bell?
Oh yeah, right. Oh yes, for sure.
I mean, did you
one of the pioneers?
Well, I mean, we're talking to one of the pioneers, but I mean, like, did you have an opportunity before you went to Europe? Did you go to San Francisco? Did you see what was happening with these other scenes? I wasn't even aware that Jacksonville had such a ridiculous, program.
Oh, it was only because of that one guy, Bill Hoskins, who was really into, he was one time a physicist and went into music, and so he really had a love that, bordered both those elements.
It's so beautiful.
And you can really get into the Moog Museum today, and there's a whole thing on Bill Hoskins and the relationship between Moog and Bill Hoskins. So that, and then an ARP 2600 synthesizer, lots of tape recorders, lots of microphones. That was kind of the standard, ensemble at the time, and that lasted for a long time. And to this day, I still wish I had some of that gear, back resurrected.
I can't believe you didn't.
Working in.
I can't believe you don't have. I mean,
oh, I know. It's kind of like that car you wish you held on to.
Well, I mean,
everybody has that thing.
Maybe you can help me, like, sort of understand. Like by the late '70s, you had synthesizers that could create sounds of other instruments. I mean, it got so perverted. It got to a point where it is. Why did it? So it became like an efficiency kind of thing. How did you try to stay true to your original gear, or did you stay up with the times? I know the Prophet was very big in the mid 70s.
I certainly had my Prophets.
You had your Prophets. But I mean, how did you deal
I have
with
one now?
Like, I mean, the idea of like bending notes on a synth to create different. I mean, that to me that was the beginning of the end, and
yeah. Well, I never looked. I never was a preset guy. So I mean, all I would ever do when I would buy these machines is just to see what type of manipulations I can do and what can I create on these machines. And certain machines would really be effective at doing that. Just basically taking the freedom that you would have on a Moog or an Op 2600 and see, well, what can I do with machines that are alive today at whatever era that may have been. So the Prophet had a lot of that. Dave Smith's Prophet 5s was, a great machine. So, I mean, you could, at that time, it wasn't that elaborate, but you could certainly do whatever you wanted to within the limitations of the machines, which were still quite extensive. But you're right. The machines, these guys moved on to what they could sell. So they just started selling things that were more towards popular music and started doing more and more functions and functionality that would suit, more, quote, commercial musicians' needs.
Can you talk, I mean, can you talk about how you wound up, I mean, it seems to me that when you went to, was it Finland? Is that where you went?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, like, did you actually get into doing jingles, commercials?
No.
So what were you doing there?
No, that was the nice thing about, I went over there on a grant. And I got to study with their, they have their state composers. So
what is that guy's name? I can't pronounce his name.
A guy named Inohani Rautavaara.
My God.
And just died a few years ago, but he was their state composer. So I basically got to study with him, which was fabulous. It was just a one-on-one thing all the time. And then, through him, I got into the Finnish Radio Electronic Music Studios. And basically, my job there was to just compose stuff. Work on, they gave me all the supplies, all the things. They even paid you. It was like,
I cannot believe this. So give me an example of what they would say, we want you to compose something for a nature program. I mean, can you give some examples?
No, they would just say, compose something for a radio concert.
Oh my gosh! This is the greatest life I've ever heard in my life. I've never heard anything like this, dude. And you were getting paid for it.
And then we'll pay you.
It was a gig.
Gee, let's see. I must be sleeping.
So I mean, that was a. Can you talk a little bit about, like, essentially you'd put something together for maybe a 90-minute show or an hour?
Yeah, or it would be on a compilation with other composers that we're using in studio. So, there would be, part of a group, like a group show.
And kind of everybody doing electronic?
Yeah, it would be something that would be produced from the electronic music studio.
Dude, please tell me you have tapes of this stuff.
I'm sorry?
Do you have any tapes of any of these broadcasts?
I think I do.
I need to hear this. This is where the rubber meets the road for Jake Feinberg, dude. I could listen to that for hours, man. I'm looping that stuff. But it was like your piece would finish, and then another cat would come in with another. It wasn't like it was all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Exactly.
That is so freaking hip. So was it every Saturday night or something? It was like a local, like a normal time slot for that?
Yeah, I mean, they're far more into the arts than we are.
I know.
Right.
Yeah, it's totally true.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally true. We are 100% mostly commercial.
Dude, it's like you can pay to play for your art. I mean, it's just you can pay to. It's horrible. Yeah. Anyway.
I mean, it's just amazing. I get freaked out when I go into like elevators and you hear something.
Oh God, it's
really from the Vietnam era days. Protest song, and it's in the elevator at the bank.
Yeah, like just give me some
gas.
Just give me some Tamul or Subotnik or something
on the gas pump.
Yeah, right. I mean, part of it's also like, I mean, this is a whole other issue that I have with modern music is just, I mean, being that I just love improvisational free music or jazz music. I mean, the rhythm sections were so conversational, and then when things moved,
absolutely,
into the drum machines and that quantized rhythm straight up and down, it just and the young kids.
Gagging.
Right. Well, I mean, my daughters get a steady diet of very round rhythm, but a lot of younger cats can't even detect that it's it's non-human rhythm. It's just like it's just not. It's not cool. It's not. It doesn't feel. There's no feel to it. I can't feel it.
100%, absolutely right.
Were you working with early drum machines too? Did you have any rhythm stuff that you would use in that Finnish radio library?
Oh no. I mean, I was, this guy Hoskins that I was telling you about in Jacksonville, Phil Hoskins.
Yeah.
He said, just it doesn't matter what road you're on, as long as if you're on the right road, it doesn't matter how fast you're going. Just stay on the right road.
I love that. No, it's true. Just you could walk on that road, man. You don't even have to drive on that road.
Yeah, that's right. You're going to get there.
Oh my gosh.
And just basically adjust your lifestyle around what you really want to do. And you said, it may be hard, but just do that, and you'll eventually get there. I thought, yeah. So
I love that. Yeah. I mean,
I've always tried to find a way that was just do what you do, and people will know. You said it earlier, guys. You can tell somebody by the way they sound, and just do that, and just sell yourself. Don't do all the other stuff.
I love it. I love it.
Other thing too, you just don't do it well because it's not you. And there are other people that are out there doing it, and it is them, and they do it really well.
Did you? Well, first of all, I got to ask this before I forget. Did you ever get hip to Harry Partch?
Oh, by far, yeah.
Can you
Way
please
back
tell
then.
me about how?
Even when I was a kid, I was into Harry Potter.
See, that's
right?
what me and you would have been hanging out, man, listening to Parch as kids, man. Dude, Harry's the sweetest. I mean, I never met the guy, but Emil Richards, who was a dear friend of mine and just passed away, the great percussionist, was, he was. So tell me how you got hip to Harry.
God, how did I get hip to Harry? I kind of always, I mean, you
were always out there. Wait, you're telling me that
I was always looking for that guy off the edge.
Lou Harrison, man?
That guy's on the edge,
God,
but I want to find the guys that are off the edge.
Way off the edge, dude. Over the cliff, dude.
When you meet somebody like Harry Potter, not meet him, but I mean, you just see what he does, and you go to an ensemble of his and you see these incredible sculptures on stage that make music. Holy shit. When he has that one-note marimba he has, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's incredible. I mean, there's a staircase that goes up to it.
Dude, it's a 40, he developed a 43-tone octave. I mean, the man was insane, right. Dude. Insane.
So it becomes as much a theatrical piece, This guy walking up the stairway with a big mallet to hit one note on this big machine. You go, boom. Because, wow. Tell me that's not cool.
Well, they have these water phones with these bows on them.
Yes,
insane,
right. Yeah.
Man.
And his crystal.
Yep.
Cloud crystals, he calls them, where he basically just got old Culligan 5-gallon water bottles and started cutting them at different lengths, and they would make these cloud chambers, and they were gorgeous.
Did you? When was the your first sort of commission piece as a pro, where some planetarium or I don't know if you ever did any soundtracks or anything, but what was the first thing that after the electronic library in Finland? What was your first commission gig? The seminal album that you put together came out in 1980, so there's some years in the 70s that I'm trying to hunker down on.
Yeah, the 70s were, when I got back from Finland, I worked on an HBO series with a guy named Mark Thorpe, who worked with Industrial Light Magic now.
Oh, my. Wait. Slowly, hold on. Mid-Sep, when did you get back to the States?
I guess it was 70, I'm guessing here now, man. Just 73, 74.
And HBO was up and running at that? I didn't even know they were...
Not right at that time, shortly after that.
All right.
Well, actually, I'll even backtrack more.
Yeah.
No, when I first got back, I started getting gigs working with PBS.
Oh,
so
my
I was doing
God.
All these early projects with PBS, composing music for them. So, some of that took me out of my bag, but basically was doing, people wanted electronic music for these things, so I started really working on that.
What kind of things? What kind of things? I mean, what kind of programs?
Well, I'd work on documentaries primarily.
Wow.
And
so cool.
And then I got a gig as an engineer because I, knew how to work all this gear. I got a gig as an engineer in a recording studio. And I thought, this is heaven for me, because when the studio's not in use, I've got the studio. So that worked out great. And then I had a studio. I did a film for a guy named Mark Thorpe, which he did for HBO, which was commissioned by the National Endowment of the Arts. But it was a film on porpoises, and it's called Betty and Eva.
Wait, I'm getting that. I'm getting that immediately. I am getting that. You did the entire soundtrack for that?
No, I didn't do the entire soundtrack. I did a good part of it, but
that is so.
I helped because of my engineering. I did all the, helped put all the audio and everything else together that was utilized in it. And then,
where was the studio? What was the studio's name, by the way?
Actually, the studio was also in Jacksonville, Florida.
Unbelievable.
It was a commercial studio there. It was run by a guy named Norm Vincent, who's no longer around.
Wow.
But so anyway, I had this. It was a gorgeous studio and a fabulous location with, beautiful outside gardens and shit like that. And so, and then there too, I just met a lot of, in the South, a lot of really interesting folk musicians, especially black folk musicians, that did a lot of real, these little towns in South Georgia and so on, and these singers would come in, and it's just I met a lot of really fabulous people.
Can you talk about a few?
Studio to myself to do all my other projects, so I brought my synthesizers into the studio. How I got involved in planetariums was kind of an offbeat thing. There was a planetarium in Jacksonville, and the guy that ran the place came over to the studio one day and says, "Hey, look, I'm broke. I can't afford to put together any programs. We need programs. Would you donate, the studio time to the museum," which was, of course, a nonprofit, "so we could put some programs together?" And so, I asked the owner. He said, "Sure, go ahead, do it." So they started relying on us to produce all of their programming for them. And then I had a little project to go over to. This is in the early 70s, like 73, 4 in that area.
Wow.
And then Germany had this thing going where it was our 250th, our centennial, 1776, right? So it would be 200 years. And then Germany was giving the United States a planetarium. And so I left the recording studio, went over to Germany, and spent time there in West German radio studios at the time in Cologne. And but before I went, the guy at the planetarium says, "Look, we're going to be in a lurch if you go and we don't have access to all your equipment." So I said, "Listen, I'll just let you," because he knew what he was doing, "I'll just let you use all of my equipment, put it in the museum, and keep it safe and use it. And, when and if I ever get back, I'll take it back from you." So when I came back, long story short, he says, "Oh, my God, what are we going to do if you take all this equipment?" He says, "Tell you what, we'll give you free space for a studio if you let us use your gear." So I said, "Deal."
Wow. Wow.
So I ended up having this really gorgeous penthouse studio space on this, in this museum. I mean, literally a penthouse with a garden that went out overlooking a river. And I thought, and they paid for it. I thought, that's cool.
Jack, I mean, I don't even know. This was not in Germany. This was in Jacksonville.
Right.
Yeah.
It's in Jacksonville. Yeah. I mean, every town, everything changes, obviously, depending on who's there and what they're doing.
So I'm sorry, Germany was giving the funds to build a planetarium, or they were actually building?
Well, Germany was giving the United States a planetarium from Zeiss. Zeiss Planetariums at that time. They were giving it to New York. A guy named Stockhausen was doing all of the music for it.
Jesus.
I got to just work over there for a while in the studio with Stockhausen and the guys that were working on this project. And that was, my role there, basically to learn to see what's going on in the German studio. What kind of synths they were using, how they were using them, etc., how they were using their tape machines, how they were producing, basically.
How did you, thinking back or looking back on it, were they doing anything that sort of blew your mind that was different from what you were doing?
No.
Right.
No. The only thing they had were really big budgets.
Well, of course, it's Europe, right? I mean, that's, again, the support of the arts.
Huge budgets. Yeah. No, they would bring in, fantastic, 16 and 24 track Studer machines, at that time, I don't even know what they would go for, $100,000 maybe. That's the other thing. Back then, to put together a recording studio, you had to have like $1 million in your back pocket. Boards, tape recorders, and I mean, you can do that stuff on your, on your laptop.
Yeah, but let's not even go into that. Yeah, it's user. Yeah, I mean, anybody can do it today, but that in itself is kind of that's a slippery slope. I mean,
no, right, yeah. Exactly.
So just to be clear, you actually, so you did the Porpoise documentary. Then you did the music for the Zeist Planetarium, so that was running.
What? No, that was Stockhausen.
That was I'm sorry, that was Stockhausen, right? Then
right, that was Stockhausen.
Explain this album.
Right.
I'm not sure if there were any LPs caught of this, but if there are, I need one. Time Waves.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting little episode there. That was with a guy that was at one time a classmate of mine, and he came back from wherever he was in New York and so on, and then the planetarium said, "Hey, we want to do a quote commercial album that we can sell and make money on the sales of this album." And so I said, okay, let's do this. So a lot of it is more, early commercial type work for sure, which actually now has a following, and people are asking me.
Wait a minute! Do not gloss over this. What do you mean? What do you mean by commercial? That it wasn't you were trying to relate it to a more trendy kind of thing? I mean, I don't even know how you would.
Yeah, I was trying to relate it to things that the planetarium specifically needed at that time to earn money. And
dude, this is, and now it's getting more popular. People are interested in it now.
Yeah, I get calls. The other guy that I work with on it, I actually haven't spoken to him ever since we've done it. So
Jeez.
I really don't know what's up, what's going on. And so yeah, every now and then I get calls from record companies saying, "Hey, we really want to release this or press it, et cetera, et cetera." I said, "Well, if you get the other guy on the line and he wants to do it, I'm fine with it."
Dude, you're just like passing it off. You're like, I can't, get a hold of the other cat, man. So
it's not really important for me, and it's not really something that you want to hang a hat on.
No.
Say, oh yeah, okay.
I
was
man.
on that album, okay, but I came out with one after that, which is certainly more my time.
That's what I want to, I'm glad you brought that up, because let's just talk about, this is the seminal album, 1980, on Spectrum Records, called Electro Acoustic.
Yeah, right.
Why don't you break that down?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, that one. Spectrum Records contacted me and said, "Hey, we've heard some of your things. There's a show in New York with Guns by it's New Sounds New York, run by John Schaefer, still going on today."
Wow.
He was playing my stuff kind of on a regular basis on his shows. Spectrum Records heard some of it. They were located in New York as well. And they said, "Hey, would you put together an album of some of your stuff for us?" And they said, "Hey, listen, don't do something like a lot of electronic guys do that are 25 minutes long that takes up the whole side."
Yeah, right. Right.
Subotnick
Subotnick or something, yeah.
Yes, right. And I said, "Oh, great! I have things that fall right into that category that I've been working on or have done for projects, and a lot of them came from planetarium productions, and then productions that I've worked on." With different grants from the state of Florida. So, one of the cuts on there is called Fantasia, and it was really when people were doing a lot of these visual coordinations with lasers and lights. Lasers and sounds, and so they wanted. So I basically worked out all these pieces, and they would do their lighting choreography to them. There were times when they would do a choreography and say to me, "Hey, write something for this choreography." But, music is the really strong rhythmic element. If it isn't right musically, it's never going to be right in any other way.
Did you have a studio in New York City that you were working out of?
No, I didn't.
So you were always dwelling in Jacksonville, pretty much. Or where, when
Jacksonville, and then I also, believe it or not, did some work at a computer animation shop in, of all places, Nashville, Tennessee.
That is so hip, man. Yeah, I think you're one of the hippest cats I've ever come across in my life. And you're still on fire, man. It's unbelievable.
Jacob, I'm just getting warmed up, man.
No, listen, I was going to say, because I have another interview. Do you think we could do set 2 next week? Because I got a lot.
Yeah, sure.
we can just keep going on this. But I actually, it's so cosmic to connect with you, man, and I'm really honored to be able to do this for a variety of reasons. But I can, Bonnie told me, she's like, my grandpa is he's a musician, and when I after talking to you now, I'm just like, it's such a different vector for me. It's just so humbling to be able to learn about some of this stuff, and also like how you incorporate it into different kinds of mediums. It's definitely not John Coltrane and McCoy Tyner, but it's got some really cool elements to it, and so I really appreciate it, man.
Oh, you're most welcome. You're most welcome.
So yeah,
we can break it down anytime.
Yeah, man, I'll get this one up tonight, and then we'll plan for set 2 next week.
Okay, sounds great.
All right, man.
Sounds great.
Much love, Jack. Talk to you soon, man.
Okay.
Later, man. Peace.
Bye.
Bye. And we'll be back with Harvey Newmark right after this.